The man in my chair. There are moments in life that split everything in two, the before and the after. I had one of those moments on a Wednesday in March. I came home early, walked through my own front door, and found a stranger sitting in my armchair like he owned the place. He didn't flinch. He didn't stand. He just looked at me, the way a man looks at an inconvenience he hasn't decided to deal with yet. And my wife. She set her wine glass down slowly and said, "Wade, you're home early." Not, "Who is this man?" Not, "Let me explain." Just that. As if me walking into my own home was the problem. That moment changed everything. Stay with me, because what happened next, this man did not see coming. Bust in silhouette character introduction. My name is Wade Reeves. 46 years old. I own a commercial cleaning company out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And before you picture something small, let me tell you what I built. 1 truck. 2 employees. A stack of business cards I handed out at every office park and hotel in Mecklenburg County. That was 16 years ago. Today, Reeves Commercial Services runs 43 contracts across 3 counties and employs 31 people. I built that with my hands, my name, and my word. Not a trust fund. Not a lucky break. Just work, the kind of work that starts before sunrise and ends long after everyone else has gone home. I'm not a wealthy man by Wall Street standards. But I built something real. And real things? They mean something to me. I met Carla at a 4th of July cookout at my buddy Rick's place. She was laughing at something across the yard, hair pulled back, wearing a red sundress, and I thought, that's the kind of woman a man builds a life around. 8 months of dating. Engaged at Christmas. Married the following October. Our son Cody came 2 years later. For a long time, things were good. Not perfect, nothing real ever is, but solid. The kind of solid you stop noticing because it's always there, like the foundation under your feet. I had no idea that foundation had been cracking for over a year. Open book the scene. I came home early that Wednesday because one of my crew chiefs called in sick and I'd handled the Harlow Tower contract myself. Finished 2 hours ahead of schedule. I figured I'd shower at home, maybe take Carla to dinner. I pulled into the driveway and noticed an unfamiliar car parked along the curb. A silver Audi. New model. Dealer plates. I didn't think much of it, figured Carla had a friend over. The front door was unlocked. I stepped inside and heard voices from the living room. 2 of them. One was Carla's. The other was a man's, low, relaxed, like he was somewhere he'd been 100 times before. I turned the corner. Carla was on the couch, legs tucked under her, holding a glass of wine. And across from her, settled into my armchair like he'd purchased it himself, sat a man I had never seen in my life. Mid-40s. Expensive haircut. Open collar shirt. The kind of shoes that cost more than my first truck payment. He didn't flinch when I walked in. Didn't stand. Didn't even shift in his seat. He just looked at me, and that look told me everything I needed to know before he ever said a word. Carla set her glass down slowly. "Wade, you're home early." Not, "Who is this?" Not, "Let me explain." Just, recalibrating. Like my arrival was the inconvenience she needed to manage. I looked at him. "Who are you?" He tilted his head slightly, like the question amused him. Then he smiled, not an embarrassed smile, not a friendly one. The kind of smile a man wears when he's already decided he's won something. "Grant," he said. "Grant Hollister." The name meant nothing to me then. But it would mean everything before the week was out. High voltage sign the confrontation. "You need to stand up," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me. You're in my house. My chair. You need to stand up." Carla moved to get between us. "Wade, don't." "Carla." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "I'm talking to him." Grant set his glass down on my end table, and rose slowly, deliberately, like a man performing patience for an audience. He was a few inches shorter than me, but he carried himself like height was irrelevant. He looked me over the way a contractor looks at a structure he's already decided to tear down. Look, he began, his tone smooth and reasonable, I think. Don't. I took one step toward him. Don't manage me. Don't explain. Don't tell me what you think. You walked into my home and sat down in my chair. That tells me everything I need to know about what kind of man you are. Something shifted in his expression then, just a flicker. The easy confidence bent slightly at the edges. Not gone, but bent. Good. I wanted him to feel the ground move under him, even just for a second. I turned to Carla. Her face was unreadable. Not guilty. Not scared. Somewhere between annoyed and calculating. That expression told me more than anything she could have said. This wasn't a mistake she was scrambling to explain. This was a situation she was managing. Get him out of this house, I said quietly. She opened her mouth. Now, Carla. Grant gathered his jacket from the back of my chair, and that small detail burned something deep, and walked to the door without another word. Carla followed him into the hallway. I heard low voices, brief. Then the front door opened and closed. She came back into the living room alone. I was standing at the window, watching his silver Audi pull away from the curb. My hands were steady. My chest was not. It's not what you're thinking, she said. I didn't turn around. You should know me well enough by now to know I'm not going to respond to that. Silence. Then her footsteps going upstairs. I stood there for a long time after that, watching the empty street, turning things over in my mind. The way she'd said you're home early, not surprised, just recalibrating. The way he looked at me like I was a problem with an obvious solution. Like walking into my house had been nothing. Like he'd already decided I was nothing. He should have kept walking the day he first stepped through my door. Before that night was over, he was going to start understanding why. The infrastructure of betrayal. Left pointing magnifying glass, the investigation begins. By morning, I had a list. The first call I made was to my older brother Dennis. He's 53, retired from the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Department after 22 years. Now he does consulting work for insurance companies, fraud investigation, asset recovery. Dennis has seen the worst of people for most of his adult life, and it made him the sharpest, most unsentimental man I know. When I told him what happened, he didn't say he was sorry. He said, "Don't touch anything in the house. Don't move money. Don't say another word to her until I get there." He was at my door by noon. We sat at the kitchen table while Carla was out. I didn't know where, didn't ask, and I laid out everything I knew. Dennis listened without interrupting, which is his way. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "Grant Hollister. Hotel operations. That's not a man who wanders into situations by accident. That's a man who plans." He was already pulling out his phone. While Dennis started making calls, I went through our financial records. Carla and I had separate checking accounts and one joint account for household expenses. I went back through the joint account statements for the past year, something I'd never had reason to do before. What I found made my jaw tighten. Restaurants I'd never been to. A hotel charge in Raleigh on a weekend I was at a trade conference. A spa day that cost $400 on a Tuesday afternoon. Individually, small things. Together, they painted a picture I couldn't UNC. Explosion symbol, the revelation. He had a system. Dennis came back inside around 2 p.m. and gave me the look he used when we were kids, and I was about to hear something I didn't want to hear. "Hollister has a right-hand man," he said. "Curtis Payne, works under him as operations coordinator for the hotel group. He's been booking hotel rooms under his own name, 2 or 3 times a month for the past 8 months. Same properties in their portfolio. Nice rooms. Not business rate." I stared at him. He was covering for Hollister. "Running interference," Dennis confirmed. Payne knew. He's been in it from the start. That changed the math considerably. This wasn't a man who lost his head over a woman. This was an operation. Grant Hollister had resources, a willing accomplice, and a wife named Cheryl at home who had no idea any of it was happening. Curtis Payne wasn't some passive bystander, he was infrastructure. And then Dennis slid a piece of paper across the table. The house deed. Titled solely in my name, predating the marriage. My father had insisted on it before our wedding, not because he disliked Carla, but because he'd watched his own brother lose everything in a divorce, and he wasn't having that happen to his son. I'd filed the paperwork and never thought about it again. Carla had never brought it up either. Maybe she didn't know. Or maybe she'd assumed it wouldn't matter. It was going to matter. Scales hash the legal war begins. The morning after came with precision, not panic. Carla came downstairs, poured herself coffee, and stood on the other side of the kitchen island like we were about to negotiate a contract. "We need to discuss this like adults," she said. "I'm being an adult," I told her. "I'm just not being a convenient one." She set her mug down. "Wade, whatever you think is happening." "I'm going to stop you there," I said quietly. "Every sentence that starts that way ends with you telling me what I saw wasn't what I saw. And I'm not interested in that conversation." Her jaw tightened. "So what are you interested in?" "Truth. Paperwork. Clarity." I picked up my laptop and walked to my office. In that order. Dennis came back that afternoon with a folder he spread across my desk without ceremony. What I was looking at was 14 months of documented meetings, Raleigh, Greensboro, twice in Asheville. And once, in a hotel 12 minutes from our house. 12 minutes. I sat with that for exactly long enough. Then I moved on. Curtis Payne had booked every single one of those rooms. His corporate card. His name on the reservation. Hollister's name appeared nowhere in the paper trail. That wasn't accidental. That was a system. And then it got worse. Bomb corporate fraud. The game changes. Hollister's been running personal expenses through his company account, Dennis said. Hotels, dinners, 2 weekend trips. Coded as client entertainment. His company reimburses him. I was quiet for a moment. "That's not just cheating," I said. "That's fraud." Corporate fraud. Potentially. Depends on how his board views unauthorized use of company funds. And that, right there, changed everything. Carla informed me that evening, not asked, informed, that she'd retained an attorney. Monica Sloan. Every man in Charlotte who'd been through a difficult divorce knew that name. "She'll be reaching out to you this week," Carla said, standing in my office doorway like she was delivering a memo. "That's fine," I said without looking up. "She's very experienced." "I'm sure she is." A pause. "Wade, this doesn't have to be a war." I looked up then. Studied her face, the careful neutrality, the tension around her eyes. "You brought a man into our home, Carla. You sat on our couch with him like I didn't exist." I held her gaze. "It was already a war. You just forgot to tell me we were fighting." She left without answering. I had one more call to make. And I'd been thinking carefully about whether to make it. I thought about Bridget Harper, a reporter at the Regional Business Journal. Sharp. Thorough. A woman who asked good questions. I picked up the phone. The trap is set. Comment finale. Because in part 3, everything Grant Hollister built comes down. One article. One courtroom. One morning that changed 4 lives forever. The fall, the settlement, and what I learned. By the time a man realizes his carefully constructed world is falling apart, it's usually too late to stop it. Grant Hollister was about to learn that. 14 months of lies, a cover story built on company money, and a subordinate willing to take the fall, and one newspaper article was going to dismantle all of it. I didn't feel angry anymore. Anger is loud and inefficient. What I felt was focused. There's a difference, and the difference matters. Newspaper the article. Bridget Harper delivers. Bridget Harper answered on the second ring. I'd thought carefully about the call before making it, weighed what I'd gain against what I'd expose, and decided the math worked in my favor. We met at a diner near my office the next morning. Mid-30s, direct eye contact, a notebook she held like it was part of her hand. I laid out the business angle, not my marriage, not my grief. The facts, a senior operations executive running personal expenses through corporate accounts, a subordinate acting as a financial cover. 14 months of a paper trail. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she set her pen down. This is verifiable. A pause. And your motivation? I looked at her steadily. He walked into my house and sat down in my chair. I want the people who write his performance reviews to know what kind of man he is. She held my gaze. Then she picked up her pen. Give me a week. I gave her the documents and walked out into the October morning feeling something I hadn't felt in days. Momentum. 8 days later, her call came on a Thursday morning. It's ready. Running online tonight. Print edition tomorrow. I independently verified the expense records through 2 sources inside the hotel group. Curtis Payne confirmed some of it without meaning to. He thought I was calling about a routine industry piece. Grant Hollister declined to comment. In my experience, declining to comment speaks for itself. The article went live at 7 that evening. I read it at my kitchen table while Carla was upstairs. Bridget had done exactly what she promised. Thorough, factual, precise. She traced the expense pattern across 14 months, named Payne as the operational cover, and outlined the total financial exposure, exceeding $22,000, in clear language. She didn't sensationalize. The facts didn't need it. By 9 p.m., Carla came downstairs. She'd seen it. Did you do that? Her voice had that careful, calm edge. I gave a reporter factual information about corporate fraud, I said. Grant Hollister did the rest himself. His board is pulling his contract, Wade. He used company money to fund something that wasn't company business. That's not my opinion, Carla. That's what the records show. She stared at me for a long moment. Then, quietly, this is going to affect me too. That, I said, is something you should have considered 14 months ago. She left the room. I stayed at the table. A text from Dennis arrived at 9:47 p.m. Board voted tonight. Hollister's out. Payne on administrative leave pending review. I set the phone face down. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. Everything ordinary. Everything changed. Scales hashed the courtroom battle. Monica Sloan was everything her reputation promised. Composed, precise, relentless. She sat across from me and my attorney Paul Garrett in a downtown conference room and laid out Carla's position like a business proposal. Half the company. Spousal support for 7 years. Equitable share of the marital home. Paul let her finish. Then he opened his folder. The marital home is titled solely in my client's name, predating the marriage by deed transfer. There is no joint ownership, no co-signed mortgage, no legal basis for an equitable claim under North Carolina property law. He paused. You know this, Miss Sloan. I imagine you discovered it before we sat down today. Something recalibrated behind Sloan's eyes, though her expression didn't shift. She was too professional for that. As for the business, Paul continued, Reeves Commercial Services was founded 4 years before the marriage, capitalized entirely by my client's personal funds and labor. Mrs. Reeves has had no operational role, no financial contribution, and no legal stake. We're prepared to discuss reasonable spousal support for a defined transition period. We are not prepared to discuss business ownership or property division on the terms you've outlined. Sloan made a note. My client made significant personal sacrifices in support of this marriage. I spoke for the first time, looking directly at Carla, not her attorney. So did I. I worked 60-hour weeks to build something stable. I covered every household expense, every vacation, every car payment. And while I was doing that, you were spending that stability on someone else. I'm not angry about it anymore, Carla. But I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen when we're talking about what's fair. Carla looked at the table. Walking out of that building into the October afternoon, Paul said quietly, she wasn't expecting the property deed. That was the anchor of their whole position. Tell them I'll consider reasonable support for 2 years, I said. Nothing else. We shook hands at the parking garage and went our separate ways. The neighbor's wisdom. Lloyd Vaughn has lived next door to me for 11 years. He's 67, retired from a textile plant he'd worked since he was 19. Divorced twice. He never talked about either marriage unless you asked directly, and when you did, he answered without self-pity or bitterness, which told you everything. He knocked on my door on a Saturday morning, 2 weeks into everything, holding a thermos and 2 mugs like a man who'd planned the conversation in advance. We sat on the porch in the early November light, leaves down, sky pale, the neighborhood quiet the way it only gets on weekends. "You know what I wish someone had told me the first time," he said after a long silence. I looked at him. "Walk away clean. Don't chase it down. Don't make them pay. Just take what's yours and walk." He wrapped both hands around his mug. I didn't do that the first time. Spent 2 years making sure Janet felt every bit of what she'd done. At the end of those 2 years, I'd lost most of my savings, half my friends, and about a decade off my life expectancy. He paused. Janet moved on inside of 8 months. I was still fighting. I listened. Because Lloyd wasn't giving advice, he was handing me a map of the wrong road so I wouldn't take it. "I'm not fighting," I said. He looked at me sideways. "What are you doing?" I thought about it honestly. "Finishing." He nodded. "Just once." Then we sat there in the quiet for a while and let the morning do its work. Sunrise the ending. What came after? The divorce was finalized 4 months later. Carla received spousal support for 18 months, less than her attorney originally demanded. She kept her car and her personal savings. The house stayed in my name. The business stayed in my name. Everything I'd built with my hands, my word, and my name, remained. Grant Hollister was terminated from his position with the hotel group and faced a civil suit from the company for misuse of corporate funds. His wife Cheryl, the woman who ran the non-profit arts organization in Concord, filed for divorce 2 weeks after the article ran. Curtis Payne negotiated a settlement with his employer and left the industry. My son Cody was 14 through all of it. Old enough to understand something had broken, young enough that I chose every word carefully. I told him only this: sometimes people we love make choices that hurt us, and we still have to choose who we're going to be on the other side of it. He nodded like he was filing it away. "That's enough." On the first morning I woke up in my house alone, fully alone. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and looked at the empty chair across from me. Not the armchair where Grant Hollister had made his first and last mistake. My kitchen chair. The one where Carla used to sit. I sat with that for exactly as long as it needed. Then I got up, rinsed my mug, and went to work. If this story hit you somewhere real, if you've ever built something from nothing and had it threatened by someone who didn't earn it, if you've ever had to choose between falling apart and standing firm, I want you to do one thing right now. Hit subscribe. Because this channel is for people who don't quit. People who face the hardest moments of life with their eyes open and their hands steady. Drop a comment below and tell me, what would you have done when that door opened? Share this story with someone who needs it. Someone going through it right now. Someone who needs to know that quiet strength and clear thinking can outlast any betrayal. We read every comment. Every one. This community is built on real stories and real people, and we're just getting started. Open book life lesson. The close. Here is what this story taught me, and what I hope it teaches you. The most dangerous thing you can do when someone disrespects you is react from emotion. Wade Reeves didn't explode. He didn't beg. He didn't chase. He sat at a kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee and a legal pad, and he thought. He protected what he built, not with rage, but with preparation. Not with revenge, but with truth. He gave a reporter facts. He gave his attorney evidence. He gave himself time to grieve and then moved forward. The man who sat in his chair left that house thinking he'd won something. He walked out having lost everything. Because here is the truth that has always been true. A man who builds his life with his own hands knows exactly what it's worth. And he will never let someone else sit in his chair. Don't forget that. And don't forget to subscribe.